The relationship between the United States and China stands as the 21st century's most defining geopolitical dynamic. Its trajectory will shape the global order for decades to come, influencing peace, prosperity, and international stability profoundly. We currently observe a period of intense competition, marked by deep strategic mistrust and escalating tensions across multiple domains. The question of whether these two great powers are destined for conflict is not merely academic. It is a pressing concern for policymakers, business leaders, and citizens around the world, as the ramifications of such a confrontation would be catastrophic, reverberating through every aspect of international life and potentially altering the course of human history. Understanding this complex relationship requires a multifaceted approach. We must examine the historical precedents of rising powers challenging established ones. We also need to analyze the intricate web of economic, political, and military factors at play. The rhetoric from both Washington and Beijing often highlights fundamental differences and competing interests. This has led many observers to draw parallels with past rivalries that ultimately ended in war. The sheer scale of their economies, their military capabilities, and their global influence means that any direct conflict would have consequences far exceeding those of previous great power struggles, making the stakes unimaginably high for all nations involved in the global system. The current international environment is further complicated by rapid technological advancements and global challenges. These include climate change, pandemics, and nuclear proliferation, which necessitate cooperation. Yet the prevailing atmosphere of suspicion often hinders collaborative efforts, even on issues of mutual concern where common ground might otherwise be found. The challenge lies in managing the competitive aspects of the US-China relationship, while simultaneously fostering cooperation where possible. This delicate balancing act requires astute statesmanship, clear communication, and a shared commitment to avoiding the abyss of open conflict, which would serve neither nation's long-term interests. Therefore, a careful examination of whether war is unavoidable is crucial. This essay will delve into the historical context, the concept of Thucydides' trap, and the contemporary factors driving US-China relations. It will also explore ongoing diplomatic efforts and potential strategies to mitigate risks and foster a more stable coexistence. History offers numerous examples of conflicts arising when a rapidly ascending power challenges a dominant established power. These historical precedents provide valuable, albeit sobering, insights into the dynamics currently at play between the United States and China. The Peloponnesian War, fought between Athens and Sparta in the 5th century BC, is a classic case. The historian Thucydides, who chronicled this conflict, famously observed that it was the rise of Athens and the fear this instilled in Sparta that made war inevitable. This dynamic of a rising power causing anxiety in an established power has repeated itself throughout history with alarming frequency. Consider the lead-up to World War I. The unification and rapid industrialization of Germany in the late 19th and early 20th centuries significantly altered the European balance of power. Great Britain, the dominant global power at the time, viewed Germany's growing economic strength, naval expansion, and assertive foreign policy with increasing alarm. This rivalry, fueled by nationalism, intricate alliance systems, and miscalculations by leaders, contributed significantly to the outbreak of a devastating global conflict. The parallels with today's situation, particularly the naval competition and struggle for economic supremacy, are hard to ignore, serving as a stark reminder of how quickly tensions can escalate. Similarly, the rise of Japan in the early 20th century and its challenge to the established Western powers in Asia culminated in the Pacific theater of World War II. Japan's ambition to create a greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere directly clashed with American interests and influence in the region. Economic sanctions imposed by the United States, aimed at curbing Japanese expansionism, ultimately triggered Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. This example highlights how economic warfare and perceived existential threats can push nations towards military confrontation, even when the costs are extraordinarily high for all parties involved in the conflict. These historical cases underscore a recurring pattern. Significant shifts in the balance of power are often accompanied by periods of heightened tension and increased risk of war. While history does not repeat itself exactly, and each situation has its unique context, these examples serve as cautionary tales. They remind us that structural stresses created by power transitions can overwhelm diplomatic efforts if not managed with extreme care. foresight, and a willingness to understand the perspectives and fears of the opposing side. Ignoring these lessons would be a perilous oversight in the current geopolitical climate involving Washington and Beijing. The concept of Thucydides' trap, popularized in recent years, directly addresses the dangers inherent in power transitions. As mentioned, it refers to the observation made by the ancient Greek historian Thucydides regarding the Peloponnesian War. He posited that when a rising power threatens to displace a ruling power, the resulting stress makes a violent clash the rule, not the exception. This is not to say that war is absolutely predetermined in every such instance. However, the structural conditions create a fertile ground for misperceptions, miscalculations, and escalations that can lead to unintended and catastrophic conflicts between nations. My research at Harvard University, examining 16 historical cases over the past 500 years where a rising power challenged a major ruling power, found that 12 of these instances resulted in war. This high incidence rate underscores the severity of the trap. The 4 cases that avoided war did so through extraordinary efforts and often painful adjustments by both the rising and the ruling power. This historical evidence suggests that escaping Thucydides' trap requires more than just good intentions. It demands wise and difficult policy choices, robust communication channels, and a deep understanding of the other side's core interests and anxieties. Applying this framework to the current US-China relationship reveals a classic Thucydides dynamic. China's dramatic economic growth over the past 4 decades, its expanding military capabilities, and its increasing global influence are challenging the United States' post-Cold War preeminence. From the American perspective, China's rise can be perceived as a threat to its long-held position as the world's leading power and to the liberal international order it helped establish. Conversely, from Beijing's viewpoint, U.S. actions to contain its rise or interfere in what it considers its internal affairs can be seen as an attempt to deny China its rightful place in the world. It is crucial to understand that Thucydides' trap is not a deterministic law of nature. It is a description of a powerful historical tendency. Leaders and nations have agency. They can make choices that either exacerbate the risks or mitigate them. Recognizing the existence and the mechanics of this trap is the first step towards avoiding it. By studying past successes and failures in managing power transitions, policymakers today can better navigate the treacherous path ahead. The trap highlights the psychological pressures on leaders, the fear in the established power, and the growing sense of entitlement in the rising one, which can cloud judgment and fuel conflict. The economic relationship between the United States and China is one of profound interdependence, yet it is also characterized by increasingly fierce rivalry. For decades, the two economies became deeply intertwined. China's manufacturing prowess supplied affordable goods to American consumers, while American investment and technology helped fuel China's rapid modernization. This symbiotic relationship, often described as chimerica, was once seen as a stabilizing factor, creating mutual benefits that would disincentivize conflict. However, the nature of this economic engagement has shifted dramatically in recent years, revealing significant underlying tensions and competitive pressures. The rise of economic nationalism in both countries has strained this interdependence. Concerns in the U.S. about large trade deficits, intellectual property theft, forced technology transfers, and unfair trade practices by China have led to protectionist measures, including tariffs and restrictions on Chinese investment. China, in turn, has accused the U.S. of trying to stifle its economic development and technological advancement. The competition is particularly acute in high-technology sectors such as artificial intelligence, 5G telecommunications, and semiconductor manufacturing, which are seen as critical for future economic dominance and national security by both global powers. This technological competition has significant geopolitical implications. The race for dominance in these critical technologies is not just about economic market share. It is also about setting global standards, controlling future infrastructure, and gaining strategic advantages. The U.S. has sought to limit China's access to advanced technologies and has encouraged allies to do the same, citing national security risks. China, meanwhile, is pursuing a strategy of dual circulation and indigenous innovation to reduce its reliance on foreign technology and bolster its own technological capabilities, aiming for self-sufficiency in key areas of its rapidly expanding economy. Despite these rivalries, complete economic decoupling remains a complex and costly proposition for both nations and the global economy. The extensive global supply chains, financial linkages, and market dependencies built over decades cannot be easily unwound without significant disruption. The challenge, therefore, is to manage this economic competition responsibly, preventing it from spilling over into broader strategic conflict. Finding a new equilibrium that acknowledges both the competitive realities and the shared interest in global economic stability is essential for navigating this difficult phase in U.S.-China relations and ensuring continued prosperity for all. Section 5. Political divides, ideologies and the quest for influence. Beyond economic and military considerations, deep political and ideological differences divide the United States and China, contributing significantly to the current tensions. The United States champions a model of liberal democracy, emphasizing individual freedoms, human rights, and a rules-based international order. China, under the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party, operates under a Leninist political system that prioritizes state control, social stability, and national sovereignty above individual liberties as understood in the West. These fundamentally different visions of governance and societal organization inevitably lead to friction on the global stage. These ideological divergences manifest in competing narratives about global governance and international norms. The U.S. often frames the contest as one between democracy and authoritarianism, seeking to rally democratic allies to counter what it perceives as China's efforts to reshape the international order in its favor. Issues such as China's human rights record in Xinjiang, its crackdown on dissent in Hong Kong, and its assertive actions in the South China Sea are frequently cited by Washington as evidence of Beijing's disregard for international law and democratic values, creating significant points of contention between the two nations. China, on the other hand, presents its model as a viable alternative for developing nations, emphasizing economic development and non-interference in internal affairs. Beijing increasingly pushes back against what it views as Western hypocrisy and attempts to impose foreign values. It seeks a greater voice in international institutions, reflecting its growing economic and political weight, and advocates for a community with a shared future for mankind that, from its perspective, respects diverse development paths and political systems. This quest for greater influence often clashes with established U.S. leadership roles in these global bodies. The competition for influence extends to various regions around the world, from Southeast Asia and Africa to Latin America. Both countries employ diplomatic, economic, and cultural tools to strengthen alliances and partnerships, often leading to a zero-sum perception of gains and losses. This struggle for geopolitical influence, rooted in differing political systems and worldviews, adds another layer of complexity to an already fraught relationship. Managing these political divides requires a degree of mutual respect for differing systems, even while upholding one's own values, and a search for common ground on transnational issues that transcend ideological boundaries. Section 6. Military dynamics, modern arsenals and regional flashpoints. The military dimension of the U.S.-China relationship is perhaps the most visibly concerning, characterized by a significant Chinese military modernization program and increasing American responses. China has been rapidly developing its armed forces, transforming the People's Liberation Army into a formidable modern military capable of projecting power far beyond its borders. This includes advancements in its Navy, Air Force, missile capabilities, and cyber warfare technologies. Beijing's stated aim is to safeguard its sovereignty and security interests, particularly concerning Taiwan and its claims in the South China Sea, but this buildup is perceived by Washington as a direct challenge to U.S. military dominance in the Indo-Pacific region. The United States, for its part, has responded by strengthening its military presence in the region, enhancing alliances with countries like Japan, South Korea, Australia, and the Philippines, and investing in new military technologies to maintain its edge. This dynamic has led to an intensifying security dilemma, where defensive measures taken by one side are interpreted as offensive threats by the other, prompting further military escalations. The risk of miscalculation or accidental conflict is particularly high in contested areas, where military forces from both nations operate in close proximity, such as the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea. Taiwan remains the most dangerous potential flashpoint. Beijing considers the self-governing island a renegade province that must eventually be reunified with the mainland by force if necessary. The United States, while officially adhering to a One China policy, maintains robust unofficial relations with Taiwan and provides it with defensive arms. Any attempt by China to coerce or invade Taiwan would likely draw the US into a direct military conflict, with devastating consequences. Similarly, China's construction of artificial islands and military installations in the South China Sea, despite an international tribunal ruling against its claims, has heightened regional tensions and concerns about freedom of navigation. The development and deployment of advanced weapons systems, including hypersonic missiles, artificial intelligence-enabled weaponry, and space-based assets, further complicate the strategic calculus. These new technologies could reduce decision times in a crisis, increase the risk of preemptive strikes, and blur the lines between conventional and nuclear warfare. Establishing clear communication channels, crisis management mechanisms, and arms control dialogues are therefore critical to reducing the risk of an unintended military confrontation. Without such guardrails, the military competition could spiral out of control, leading to a conflict that neither side truly desires but both sides feel compelled to prepare for. Section 7. Diplomatic Channels: Navigating Mistrust and Seeking Dialogue. Despite the pervasive mistrust and escalating competition, diplomatic channels between the United States and China remain active, though often strained. High-level dialogues occur periodically involving top diplomats, defense officials, and economic policymakers. These meetings provide opportunities to articulate concerns, clarify intentions, and explore potential areas of cooperation, even if breakthroughs are rare. The primary challenge for diplomacy in the current environment is to manage disagreements effectively and prevent competition from veering into open confrontation, rather than resolving all underlying disputes, which is an unrealistic short-term goal. Recent efforts have focused on re-establishing and maintaining open lines of communication, particularly between the militaries, to reduce the risk of miscalculation and accidental escalation. Discussions on strategic stability, including nuclear confidence-building measures, have also been tentatively explored, though significant progress remains elusive due to differing strategic priorities and levels of transparency. Both sides acknowledge the importance of avoiding conflict, but their approaches to achieving this often diverge. Washington tends to emphasize transparency and verifiable agreements, while Beijing prioritizes strategic autonomy, and often resists measures it perceives as constraining its development or infringing on its sovereignty. Beyond bilateral talks, multilateral forums such as the G20, APEC, and the United Nations provide additional venues for US and Chinese officials to interact and address global issues. Areas where cooperation is not only possible but essential include climate change, global public health, counter-narcotics, and preventing nuclear proliferation. Progress in these areas can help build a modicum of trust and demonstrate that the two powers can work together on shared challenges, even amidst broader strategic rivalry. However, such cooperation is often held hostage by the overall state of the relationship, becoming more difficult when tensions are high. The effectiveness of these diplomatic efforts is frequently hampered by domestic political pressures in both countries and by the deeply ingrained strategic suspicion. Public opinion and political rhetoric often emphasize rivalry over cooperation, making it difficult for leaders to make concessions or appear soft on the other side. Sustained, patient, and pragmatic diplomacy is therefore required, focused on identifying specific, achievable outcomes that serve mutual interests. The goal is to build a floor under the relationship, preventing it from collapsing into outright hostility, while carefully managing the inevitable points of friction that will continue to arise. Section 8. Strategies for de-escalation: Building Guardrails for Peace. To avoid a catastrophic conflict, both the United States and China must actively pursue strategies aimed at de-escalation and the establishment of robust guardrails. One crucial element is the institutionalization of crisis communication and management mechanisms. This involves ensuring that reliable channels of communication are open at all levels, especially between military commanders, to prevent accidents or misinterpretations from escalating into larger crises. Regular dialogues on strategic stability, including discussions about nuclear doctrines, cyber warfare, and space security, are also vital to reduce the risk of unintended conflict and build a baseline of mutual understanding, even among rivals. Another key strategy involves clearly defining and respecting each other's core national interests and red lines. While agreement on all issues is unlikely, a mutual understanding of what each side considers vital can help prevent actions that could trigger an uncontrollable response. This requires candid, private discussions away from the glare of public diplomacy. For the US, this might mean acknowledging China's legitimate desire for a greater role in global governance. For China, it could involve providing greater transparency about its military intentions and respecting freedom of navigation in international waters, thus reassuring its neighbors and the international community. Enhancing areas of mutual interest and cooperation can also contribute to a more stable relationship. Addressing global challenges like climate change, pandemics, and economic instability requires concerted efforts from both powers. Successful collaboration on these fronts can create positive momentum and demonstrate that competition does not have to define every aspect of the relationship. Furthermore, fostering people-to-people exchanges, academic collaborations, and cultural understanding can help bridge the gap of mistrust and humanize the other, counteracting narratives that promote animosity and simplify complex realities for domestic political consumption. Finally, both nations should adopt a long-term strategic perspective that recognizes the profound dangers of unrestrained rivalry. This involves moving beyond zero-sum thinking and exploring frameworks for managed strategic competition. Such a framework would acknowledge that competition is inevitable, but seek to establish rules and norms that keep it within acceptable bounds, preventing it from degenerating into war. This requires visionary leadership willing to make difficult choices and prioritize long-term peace and stability over short-term geopolitical gains, a task that is immensely challenging but absolutely essential for the future. Section 9 Conclusion: Choosing a future beyond inevitable conflict. The question of whether a US-China war is unavoidable looms large over the international landscape in 2025. History, particularly the insights from Thucydides' Trap, warns us that periods of power transition are fraught with danger. The confluence of economic rivalries, political ideological divides, and military modernization programs creates a volatile mix. The potential flashpoints, especially concerning Taiwan and the South China Sea, carry the undeniable risk of escalating into direct military confrontation, the consequences of which would be devastating for both nations and the entire world, ushering in an era of unprecedented global instability. However, to assert that war is inevitable is to succumb to a dangerous fatalism. While the structural stresses are real and significant, human agency and wise statecraft can make a profound difference. History also shows examples where major power transitions occurred without catastrophic conflict, often through painful adjustments and extraordinary diplomatic skill. The United States and China are not merely passive actors subject to historical forces. Their leaders have choices, and these choices will determine whether the 21st century is defined by conflict or by a managed, albeit competitive coexistence that allows for continued progress. Avoiding Thucydides' trap requires a multifaceted strategy. This includes establishing robust communication channels to prevent miscalculation, clearly defining red lines, managing economic competition responsibly, and seeking common ground on transnational challenges such as climate change and global health. It demands a shift from a zero-sum mentality to one that recognizes shared interests in global stability and prosperity. Diplomacy, though difficult and often frustrating, remains the most crucial tool for navigating these treacherous waters, requiring patience, persistence, and a willingness to understand the other's perspective, even amid deep disagreement. Ultimately, the future of US-China relations is not predetermined. It will be shaped by the decisions made in Washington and Beijing today and in the years to come. Recognizing the severe risks outlined by historical precedents and contemporary tensions is the first step toward actively working to avert them. By fostering strategic empathy, strengthening guardrails against escalation, and pursuing avenues for cooperation where possible, it is conceivable that these two great powers can navigate their differences without resorting to war, choosing instead a path that, while undoubtedly complex and competitive, leads towards a more stable and peaceful global order.